The Indie Writers Club is brought to you by Publish Drive. With one click, self-publish your ebooks, audiobooks and print books to thousands of stores and libraries worldwide. And now you can start for free forever. Publish Drive's new free plan lets you publish your first ebook to 35 stores worldwide absolutely free. No subscription fees, no commissions. Keep 100% of the royalties. Get your titles online in just a few minutes at publishdrive.com.
It's the Indie Writers Club with Cara, Claire and James Blatch. A place to relax, chat, learn and vent about life as an independent author. Get episode alerts and links at indiewritersclub.com. Now, here's Cara and James.
Hello and welcome. It's the Indie Writers Club with me, James Blatch.
And me, Cara Claire.
We always decide who's going to say that at the beginning, and I said, I think it's me, and said it, then I immediately remembered it's you.
Yeah, that's the first time I think that we've got it wrong. Never mind.
Yeah, because I tripped up, didn't I, last time? I introduced the wrong show.
I don't think anyone will notice or wouldn't have done until we'd pointed it out.
Never. So in the old days of radio, when I joined radio, it was very old-fashioned, and it was that thing where if you were a broadcaster, you're a professional broadcaster, and you adhere to all these professional rules. Hello. And then suddenly iPhones came along and content creating was everybody, and we were, of course, completely snobbish about that. It would never take off, nothing will work. And before you knew it, that's kind of the real thing, and broadcasting now sounds a bit old-fashioned and crap. But we had lots of rules, like dead air is a crime. You can't not speak. Never refer to your mistakes.
Okay.
Never highlight mistakes.
I think it's better to reference them and have a laugh about it.
It is. Look at my glasses.
Yeah, you do look a bit...
What's wrong with them?
Look like I just dragged you out of bed.
To be fair, I did sit on them.
Oh, hello. Did you?
Yeah, I sat on them a little while ago, and these are the only glasses I can currently find, which means my other glasses are somewhere in pockets of coats, as I have to go and find them at some point. Anyway, sorry, this is banter too far. You've got a coffee, lucky you. You know, I still do this thing where I'm nil by mouth till about midday.
I do. What, even coffee?
Hello, and even coffee.
I couldn't do that.
It's weird, isn't it, as a writer, to put coffee off? But, you know.
Weird. I try not to drink as much these days, but, you know.
The theory behind it is you have 16 hours of not imbibing anything, and so your body knows
what it's like to feel hungry.
Yes. It's
and
nice
then you're grateful.
Robin, author friend, and I, and 15,500 other people ran the Cambridge Half Marathon on Sunday. Currently recording this on Tuesday, so I'm a little bit stiff, and I found it quite hard because I wasn't as well prepared this time as I was last year. So last year I did it 7 or 8 minutes quicker, and it was easier. This year, 7 or 8 minutes slower, and it was really hard. And that's just because who knew that, you know, there's a correlation between the time you spend training for something and practicing and doing it.
Well, you've had a lot going on. You've had a lot going on.
I'm not doing those excuses. I mean, the only excuse I'll accept myself, and I was absolutely part and parcel of it, is we had such a shocking winter here.
We did.
It was cold and miserable and raining all the time, and going out, and it's dark because for this half marathon, your 12-week training period is December, January, February. So you are in the darkest months. Hello. And that's the reason I just didn't want to do it. I just thought, I'm going to keep things ticking over. I'll do the odd 5K, a bit slightly longer run, and I'll get round. And I got round in 2 hours and 5 minutes. I had to carry... I
was about to say, I heard a rumour that you were a little bit of a hero at the end there, James Black.
We got a lot of applause from the crowd, me and this the random woman. So this guy, we were about 400 metres from the end, and there was a guy probably in his early 70s. He looked quite fit, but he was wobbling all over the place, and I knew he was about to go. And he suddenly went... So me and this other guy happened to be running next to each other, grabbed him. He hit the ground, even though it was quite hard to hold him. And it got him down there, and the crowd all because it's quite a thick crowd right at the end. There was what's going on. And I said to him, look, just stay there. The medics are going to come. Just recover yourself, because you worry about heart. Mm-hmm. And you do hear stories. I remember hearing a story about somebody who had a heart attack and was persuaded to walk from the car park to the hospital, instead of sitting down in the car park and allowing them to come to him, and that did for him.
Wow.
But this guy's like, no, I want to get up, I've got to get across the line. So before we knew it, he's sort of trying to get up. So we're having to help him get up. Hello. And then he's trying to walk, but he can't really walk. Graciously, he allowed us to carry him the last 400 meters. The crowd are going wild at this point. They think this is the best thing they've ever seen. It's like a story unfolding in front of them. They're all applauding. I don't remember looking at any of the crowd. I just heard them all cheering.
Hello.
So that we carried him, me and this woman, over the line. And I did say to her, I saw her afterwards and we're collecting our T-shirts and medals and stuff. And I had a chat with her. She said her husband, who she was running with, was just ahead of us and he's a paramedic. So she was looking at him and he was going, no, leave him.
Leave him. Save yourself.
Anyway, so yeah.
Also, that must have added about, 3 minutes onto your time?
Well, 2:05 is my actual... So funny enough, this is a really bit boring technical stuff, but the course is a little bit longer than a half marathon. And I think it's always the case that they do them a little bit longer because it would be a disaster to go through the finish gate and then realise you haven't actually run the distance. So they have a few hundred yards added on. And I suppose if you cut every corner like a racing line, it probably is about exactly a half marathon. Most people run in the middle of the road, so over 13.1 miles. So long story short, about that 400 metre point was roughly where the half marathon point was. So that was my 2:05. It did take us 2 more minutes. So if you look at my official time, it says 2:06:41 or something. But anyway, that's dull.
Hello. Well done. What a hero.
Hello.
Thank you. What a hero, yes. Suspect I did get a medal, but only this family.
If anyone has any footage of this, feel free to post it so we can all celebrate.
Should have been on TV, shouldn't it?
It really should have. It should have been on the news. What a shame.
John, his name was.
Hello.
Well, John, if you're listening, hi.
I should try and look him up, actually, because obviously he crossed the line at the same time as me. So I could probably look him up in the results. Just check he's still alive.
News. Shall we move on to something publishing related? Because there's something quite big going on this week.
There is, yeah. So we're going to talk about a couple of things in this episode. And the main theme of it is going to be the image of self-publishing. So how that's changing. And that's not just what the public think of self-publishing, but also what Trad thinks of us and what we think of ourselves. So we're going to talk about that. And that's been highlighted by a particular article this week. But before then, in self-publishing news, shall we talk about the boycott or a boycott? Oh, by the way, I know nothing about, apart from someone posted a couple of days ago and I read the headline, but I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people might not have even noticed. Some people might be sitting there thinking, my sales seem a bit funny. It might not have impacted you at all. So basically, this is kind of in response to, and we won't go into the politics because we kind of want this to be a safe, happy space, but it's in response to what's going on in the US. There is a boycott going on from last Friday, so that was the 7th of March, to Friday the 14th of March, where basically people are being told, don't buy anything from Amazon. I think there's a couple of other places as well, Target, Walmart and something else, but mainly Amazon is the thing that's obviously affecting us. And if I'm honest, I'd heard about it and people had said, there's this boycott coming up, and I sort of didn't really think it would make much of an impact. I didn't think that many people would be doing it, but I suppose it shows how big our audience is in America. And even if a small percentage of those people leave Amazon, the impact that it can make. So one of my friends, this might have been the post that you saw on Facebook, her income is down 75%. Mine is down 20%. And the thing that's worrying me is that my rank is falling like a stone. So I'm very KU heavy. So obviously my page reads, people will have already downloaded my book and those people are still reading it. But my rank is the lowest that it's been since I published this series.
Was there a particular day when it started?
Started Friday.
What date was Friday?
Friday the 7th. And it's supposed to last until this Friday. But there is talk of obviously other boycotts going on. And it's a very difficult one because on one hand, I completely believe in the power of people to protest. And it's kind of awesome that it's actually having that effect, that people are actually going, look, we're trying to make a point. But also Amazon's a very difficult platform because it's not like many other things in that, a lot of small creators make their money, like authors, people who sell products on there, are making their money predominantly from Amazon.
Yeah.
And especially for us, it's having a huge impact for a lot of people. So hopefully after Friday it will pick back up.
So this is a political thing. It's people who are sort of anti the current government in the States, and they're attacking Amazon and these companies. Why?
I think it was in response to Amazon postponing all of their diversity programs and things like that.
Okay.
What's going on in the government. So I think...
But haven't they been told to do that, or is that they're doing that voluntarily?
But yeah.
The funny story that popped up in my little world of military aircraft this week is that the Trump administration have gone through...
I heard this.
Have you heard this story about the Enola Gay? The Enola Gay, one of the most famous airplanes in the world, that dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. And there's obviously lots of photographs. I've seen the plane itself is in the museum in Washington, outside Washington, D.C. in Virginia, but the photograph of it disappeared from the archive, and people were trying to work out why, and they realised that somebody just went through on the word gay and,
obviously,
and deleted every photograph.
Like, without getting into how ridiculous and horrific it is that they're what they're doing in the first place. Yeah, essentially, whether it was a bot or whatever, removing any references to gay from their military, from their
it was like the
sites, I think,
official archive,
like that. Yeah. So obviously, one of the things that they're kind of the most proud of ended up.
Yeah,
all the photographs being taken down and
well, look,
but yeah, so it's in response to everything that's going on.
Yeah, and
I would say, it is worrying, but it shows us. It's another thing. A little while ago we had TikTok disappear for 24 hours. This just shows that we really have to be working on other platforms, and most of us know this. And that's the difficulty: is that it's going to take a while for us to bring readers away from the Amazon ecosystem. Most authors I know are working on their direct sales platforms. We're trying to have, our books for sale in different formats in other places, but that takes a while. It takes a while if you've been really KU Amazon heavy to build that up. But I think it is a sign that we don't know what's happening. We don't know what's going to happen for the rest of the year in the future. So start building those things up if you haven't already. And we always harp on about a newsletter. Have a newsletter, because it just shows that if Amazon did disappear, the effect that it would have on us.
Yeah.
The effect.
In the 5 immediate actions for new self-publishing authors PDF I mentioned last week, one of them is build a mailing list from the word go, because Amazon, however, convenient as a platform and influential and huge it is for us, this sort of thing can happen. And they're never going to give you the names of the people who buy your books, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think as well, try to, without being preachy about it, it's okay to educate your readers about some of this stuff, because I've had people come up to me at book signings and things and say, we're kind of aware that buying from Amazon isn't probably the best thing for authors, but we don't know what else to do. We don't really understand. The average consumer or reader doesn't understand. So it's okay every now and again to just explain to them, if you want to support your favorite authors, it's better to buy from us direct. These are the other places that you can buy our books. Support libraries, that sort of thing.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, it's interesting to hear from one of your friends that they've seen quite a significant drop.
She posted her graph as well, and I think mine as well. It's down. Yeah, considering.
I mean, I can see there is a little bit. That's the reason I said 28th. So I think maybe I don't know. I had a deal going in February, so that's probably what that was. But then it looks like there was a drop off the 28th. So I'm not sure for me. But then also that might be this particular campaign for military age. Military veterans who read my books might be much less likely to do any boycotting, and B, probably might reject this idea anyway. Whereas spicy romance kind of reverse horror readers, younger, much more likely to engage in social action, much more likely to have sympathy with the campaign. And so this is kind of genre dependent as well, until Amazon does something that my audience thinks is very woke. And they say, right, we're going to boycott Amazon because it's terrible woke organisation.
I think also dependent on where your main readers are. My main readership is the US, so that's obviously going to impact me more. It's the same with when to. But I mean, I'll fill you in, next week. But I would expect that 20% drop in sales to get bigger because my rank has dropped so much. And at the moment, I've still got those historic downloads because people download in KU and they don't read straight away. But yeah, hopefully it'll pick up again after Friday, the 14th, but we'll see.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see what happens there. And it is annoying, isn't it? Because I think the people who perhaps are sympathetic to this campaign and are boycotting Amazon, the last thing they want to do is to just because it's not the lives of small independent authors.
Yeah. It's kind of awesome that it's made an impact and people are being able to say something, but at the end of the day, does it really affect their Amazon's bottom line? That 1 week, it's going to have more of an impact probably on the individuals who are selling on the platform.
Yeah.
But what else do you do in order to make a point? So
yeah.
But hang in there. If you think you're being affected by it, just hang in there. We're all
it's at least as a finite thing. One thing would help is a wider understanding of independent publishing, and that's one thing. That's what we're going to talk about now. Is we're going to talk about kind of the attitude towards indie publishing, self-publishing, and that was highlighted by an article that was written, one interview that Bill Bryson, the author, gave to the Times in London, in the UK. So Bill Bryson's a very witty travel writer. I think most of us read all his books in the probably in the 90s, weren't they? His Australia one, Notes from a Small Island was the UK one.
I think I used to buy one of his books for my dad, like every Father's Day, every birthday.
And they're great and they're witty. I mean, he's a little bit acerbic, I think. And I remember in the Australian book, he talked about how the young people put an inflection at the end of their sentence just to annoy the old people. And he loved that. He loved that antagonism stuff. And I thought, so there's a little bit, and I sort of recognize that slightly antagonistic personality in there, but very witty, books thoroughly recommended. But he has said in this article, he's basically attacked self-publishing. There's too much self-publishing, too many books going out. The first quote is a slightly confusing one, although it's clarified a little bit later on. He says, the self-publishing world has become too big with far too many books about some anonymous person's life. I didn't quite know what that meant, but he does explain a little bit later. But he went on to say, too many people now write because they think suddenly it makes you a writer. It does make you a writer. I'm sorry, Bill.
I was like,
if you write, you are a writer, and you can't decide that somebody isn't a writer. Yeah. That's the thing that's going on here.
That really irritated me probably the most. I mean, I think actually we should say it's a very clickbaity article. It's definitely been, there's not that much from Bill Bryson.
No, it's probably a long conversation. These are three things he said in the middle of it.
He may have said many other things as well, but these are the things that the journalist has chosen to put into the article with the headline, Bill Bryson says too many people are publishing their own books. But yeah, I mean, writing a book does make you a writer. Even if you haven't published that book, even if you're writing poems, even if that makes you a writer. It's the same as if you sketch in a sketchbook every day, you're an artist. So that irritated me. That did irritate me.
That was irritating. He also, another odd comment that may have been taken out of context, he was referencing how many books are published annually. And in the UK, the Times pulled out some figures saying that's increased from 120,000 10 years ago to an estimated 200,000 now. That seems a low rise to me.
Yeah.
Which Bill Bryson says more books than you could possibly read, but obviously we've had more books than you could possibly read for a couple of 100 years.
You couldn't get through 120,000 books either, so that feels kind of a ridiculous point to make.
So he goes on, another sort of comment that I think both of us found irritating, if it's in context, to dear old Bill here. If you want to pass your book on to your kids, then fine, write your book. But not if you're doing it because you think it suddenly makes you a writer. And you can bother people for quotes for the book. I get sent a lot of self-published books, and most of the time it is just some anonymous person's life and it is of no interest. So that sort of explains partly where this is coming from. So it's been bombarded with books a lot more than used to happen under the gatekeeping system. Secondly, he's obviously being sent non-fiction memoir because that's what he writes. Effectively, his books are memoir, travel books. So, and I know, and I have some sympathy with this point, but I would never criticize somebody for writing a memoir. But I often receive an email from someone saying, my daughter has a particular disease. I'm her primary carer, and I really want to write this book to tell the world about this. Or I've been through the worst divorce you could possibly imagine, or some big life event. I really want to write this book. And I always say to them, absolutely. And I think therapeutically, from a cathartic point of view, I would 100% recommend that. I think it's a brilliant thing to do. If you're asking me, will this be a commercial success, or shall I want to be a writer and sell my books? Don't start with that. Start with your market research. Look on Amazon, see what books are selling, and if you can find there's a whole plethora of these books that are in the charts about this particular subject, then fine, but that's not the case in what you've just described to me. So it's unlikely to be a successful book for you commercially, but that's not an invalid reason. That doesn't make, invalid your reason for writing it. Now, that's maybe what he's looking at. These books are being sent to him, and people are a little bit delusional thinking this book's, because it means a lot to me personally of what I've been through. I think the world wants to know this. Now, unfortunately, the world is cruel like that, and it doesn't necessarily value or rate what is important to you. So maybe that's what's going on here.
So I used to work as a book coach, and I used to work primarily with non-fiction and quite a few people who'd written memoirs. And the conversation I would always have when we sat down was, this probably is not going to be a commercial success. Like it's not, no matter how interesting, no matter how unique, it's going to be really hard for you to make a lot of money from this, purely because it doesn't really operate on the same model. It's very, we talk all the time about how to market your books, and it's very hard to do that with one memoir. It's really hard to make a significant profit. But also, I've worked with people who have genuinely had some really important stories to tell. And even if that book reaches a few people who it helps, and that's a lot of the time, some people do come at it from a kind of egotistical point of view. I think my life is the best. I think I've done some really cool stuff. I want people to read about it. And so I got a sense of which ones were which. Like, there'd be some people who go, well, I don't mind. I'm not in this for the money. But when it makes the premiere of the, when Steven Spielberg makes the movie, and I'd have to be quite firm with them and be like, I really want you to understand that that's not likely to happen. But, for example, I worked with one lady who she had a disabled son who died. She spent 2 years interviewing other parents and getting their stories and their perspectives. And it was a really, even if that book reached 10 people, that would have been so, so important for those people to read. And she did a really good job of it. I coached her through it. She'd done a lot of the work already, and it was professionally done. She got a really good cover done. She got a website. She did all of this stuff. And her main goal was just to reach people who needed to read the story. My ex-father-in-law wrote his life story down, and it was actually fascinating. The things he'd done when he was in the army, he was shipwrecked. He was all of these things. And you sort of think, well, who was Bill Bryson before he was Bill Bryson? Like, kind of, just because nobody knows you doesn't mean you don't have a story worth telling. But I appreciate that he probably does get inundated by manuscripts that aren't particularly good, that haven't been professionally edited.
And to be fair to Bill Bryson, this might just have been a little aside, because that week he'd been sent 10 or 15 minutes. He didn't quite mean it to take off in this way. But
exactly.
I mean, I'll get to what I think is the unspoken thing that is going on here in a moment.
Exactly.
But the article actually interviewed a guy called Andrew Chapman, a publishing consultant. I don't know who he is, but anyway.
I looked him up actually, because I was like, who is this person? And actually, he seems to offer some very sensible publishing advice.
And I think his quotes are good in this article. Yeah. I think they kind of bring some balance. He's a lot more moderate about it. But he does say it's a crowded marketplace, and he definitely sees a variety of quality in people's work. But he said, all writers ultimately aspire to be in a bookshop above Amazon. Everybody would love to see them on the shelf. It's hard not to feel they are more and more dominated by celebrity. So he sort of points out the difficulty of getting to that point as a self-published author. And there's another couple of comments in here about the number of self-published books, meaning it's harder for good self-published authors to be heard. But here's the thing. I think the unspoken thing here is, I think that the book industry has worked in a particularly odd way for 100 years or 200 years, where you've had this massive gatekeeping system where agents and editors and book publishers decide who's going to be a writer, who's not going to be a writer. Now, the mistake would be to think that power has gone to self-publishing authors, to people, to the writers. They decide. The power has gone to the readers.
Exactly.
And the power has gone to the readers in the same way that it operates in every other bloody industry in the world. You build cars. Nobody says to Joe Bloggs, or, I know it's a very loaded term now, but it's the only new manufacturer I can think of. But no one said to Elon Musk, you can't build cars.
Exactly.
He built cars, and if people want them, they buy them. And if they don't want them, they don't buy them. And that's how the whole world works. Apart from books, didn't work like that. You're selected in advance.
If you want to make handmade soap,
yes,
and you sell it on Etsy, you can do that. And the people who buy it are the ones who... I have to try really hard to calm down with this topic, right? Because I did an MA in publishing, and part of that MA was a module in the history and culture of publishing. I nearly did a PhD in it, but I decided I didn't want to study for that long. And part of it was studying the gatekeeping of books, and right down to edits. So I don't know if you've heard of the author J.M. Coetzee, really huge author. So part of one of the huge papers that I wrote was looking at things like not just the cover and the choices that were made, but right down to the edits and the things that were edited out of his novels. And that decision is made by an editor. So for me, the fact that actually as readers, that gatekeeper has been removed. As an independent author, you can hire an editor, but nobody can make you change what you want to say, change your cover. Whether your story is good or not is what determines
whether people read it and buy it.
Yes, and that is the same for other industries. So this worry that there's too many books being published, so good authors can't have their books heard, their voices heard. That is true, but it's the same in every other industry, and it's just a case of the other things, the marketing, the advertising, all that stuff. It becomes more important in that way, but that's not a reason not to do it, because I'm not sure the other system, as you describe, this sort of gatekeeping system that gave us quite specifically written books and edited books, was a better way of doing things than we now have this myriad of amazing variations in books, and readers ultimately get served. And some of that stuff doesn't matter, by the way. T.S. Paul, late T.S. Paul, I remember interviewing him years ago, and he wrote this sci-fi book that, by his own admission, he hadn't even, he's someone like me. He writes typos and misses words when he writes full time. It never occurred to him to have it edited. So he put the book out there. The book sold phenomenally well, but it got 3.5 stars. I mean, he was making a fortune because people loved his book because the story was absolutely gripping. But everyone left a bad review saying, by the way, it's full of typos. And it didn't really matter. He got the typos corrected and he went on to a very successful career before, unfortunately, he passed away, old Scott Paul. But kind of, he wouldn't have been, his books never would have seen the light of day under the old system. Never would have got there. And we can say that for how many people. I've got lots and lots of letters from people who've enjoyed my books. I've never tried to get a traditional contract, but I suspect I wouldn't get one. And my books wouldn't have seen the light of day. So how can you say to the 25,000 people who've read my book, most of whom seem to have enjoyed it, many of whom have written to me about it afterwards, they were wrong to have read my book? That's basically the Bill Bryson position here. They were wrong to have been allowed to see my book. They were wrong to have read my book. There should have been gatekeeping in place, and they should only be presented books that we have decided, the publishing industry, have decided are fit for consumption.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, did we have this conversation on the show or down the pub about Dan Brown? I think we had it on the show, didn't we? Where we were talking about, people who decide what's good or what's not. At the end of the day, if the book provides entertainment or value, whatever that value is, to the person who reads it, then isn't that the main thing? Isn't that the main point?
The only thing.
Especially, in my genre, people are so snobby about it. And I know that, Britt Andrews, who lots of people know, who writes Reverse Harem, she's got so many readers who come up to her and say her characters suffer from things like postnatal depression and her characters are plus sized. And thank you for writing this book, because it not only was entertaining, but it gave me something important. And I just fact checked myself because I thought this and I was like, is this true? Jane Austen self-published Sense and Sensibility and Emma. And technically, J.K. Rowling self-published her ebooks because she kept the rights to those ebooks. There's a lot of, if we go back, self-publishing is actually a thing because people wanted to get their message out there. They literally were printing their work at home on printing presses and distributing them by handing them out to people. So it's not a new thing. It's always happened.
It was a period during which this industry sprung up, decided how it was going to do things, and it's falling apart now. But there has been a shift in attitude. So let's move on to our discussion about the attitude towards self-publishing. And I think the interesting one we'll start with is traditional publishing's view of self-publishing, which I think in the last 2 years has made quite a big shift. So before 2 years ago, we were still in the hands over the monkeys, see no evil, hear no evil. They were kind of ignoring self-publishing. They were intrigued by it, maybe. They were snobbish about it. They rolled their eyes at the poor quality as they viewed it, all the rest of it, all that stuff going on. But they didn't really see it as a proper threat because they looked at the size of their Titanic ships and thought, this is unsinkable. This is an unsinkable thing. And to an extent, they're probably right because they have such a big distribution network. They've got all those bookstores sewn up, basically built into part of their system. It's always going to be hard for us to get to. So there's some truth in the fact that they are immovable objects in that sense. But there's no doubt that their system, I can remember there being a dichotomy of somebody choosing between self-publishing and traditional publishing, thinking, if I publish my book, traditional publishing will never be interested in it because they do not pick up books that have already been published. And that goes back, those 100 years. Why would you, if it's already been published, why would you publish it? You can't, all the copyright, and plus it's sordid picking up somebody else's published books.
Yeah, and competitions as well, a lot of competitions, a lot of prizes, a lot of everything excluded self-published. If this is self-published, we're not interested. If you've previously self-published, we are not interested. It was very much, okay, if I make this decision, I'm basically cutting off my chance to ever be traditionally published, because not only will they not want this manuscript, they won't want any others because they'll look down on the fact
that has changed.
It has.
That has changed in the last 2 years. And the MO now of the big trad companies is to read self-published books and find out who's writing good books. That's the irony.
I give people is the best thing you can do if you want a traditional publishing deal is to self-publish, make it successful, and then they'll be interested.
Yep, that is Colin Hoover did in Lucy in print deals, and Andy Weir and others. That's what they've all done. So that's now becoming a thing. And I think if you're an author now, if you want to be a traditionally published author, self-publishing is absolutely the route you should do it, because that is your calling card, that is your social proof, your commercial proof to the industry that will help you get a contract. And yet on Twitter, I still see all these little community of agents and wannabe authors talking constantly about how to query and how to do your query notes. And I'm an agent. I'm going to tell you the 5 things you can get wrong with your query. And I think, bugger off. Why are you encouraging people to write these stupid begging letters?
Because they want a percentage of the money.
Write your bloody book, upload it to Amazon, put a good cover on it, have it well edited. That is going to speak volumes to a potential traditional publisher, much more than how well you've written your query note and got an agent.
And it then gives you some power. It gives you some power in the negotiations. You're not writing a begging letter. You're not accepting 5% or 10% just because that feels, oh, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. You chose me. Amazing. You've actually got the opportunity to think about what's going to be best for you in your author career. And we've had this conversation before, I think, about people being given, I got £100,000 advance. Amazing for this book. But that's for one novel. That probably is going to take 2 years to publish.
Usually, I mean, the stories I hear it's like for a 3-novel deal was worth 100,000. And 6 or 7 years later, you've earned less than somebody working at McDonald's.
Yeah, being able to say to your mates, I got a 6-figure advance.
Don't even get free burger.
Hachette or whoever. That sounds super impressive. All your friends will be very impressed by that. But if you actually boil that down to how long it took you to write the book and how long you're going to have to live off that money, because that you've got to earn that out before you get any more. So on your 5 or 10%, that's going to take a really long time. And I think actually one of the points, going back to that article that Andrew Chapman made, that's really important for people who are just coming into this to understand is you've got to put aside your ego. Because one of the things people always say to me is, so are your books in bookshops? Can I get your book in Waterstones? And when I say no, that you sort of see this like, all right, so you're not a real author then because you're just on Amazon. But if you break it down to them and explained, I'm not going to make any money from being in Waterstones. That might be a lovely ego boost to walk in and be able to take pictures next to my book. And yes, there's the thing about, several points of contact. It's nice for people to see your book in different places and it might encourage them to buy it. But if we're talking about actually the money that you make, or even just the readers that you make, how many books are you feasibly going to sell unless you are, Colleen Hoover or Richard Osman by being in a bookstore? Like
big breakout. But it is, and I freely admit it is. And Andrew Chapman's right in that book. Most of us do want that. We do want to walk through Heathrow Airport, JFK Airport, and see our book on the bookstore. It was amazing.
Buzz. It would give me a huge buzz. But that's not going to be a reason for me to try and chase a trad deal over what's best for my career. It
depends what you want, but it's not. It should not be a commercial consideration of yours at the beginning of your publishing career, because that's not where the money's going to come from. You're right. But it does depend what your measure of success is, because that might be your measure of success, in which case, again, work hard, self-publish your books, be successful, become a better writer, and that is the path to that kind of trad contract now. So that's interesting. So I think there is continued skepticism in traditional publishing, and they do things in a particular way.
They're still quite rigid in their
their editing and
how long it takes them to get something to market. It just kind of blows my mind, really, because you think, well, surely trends have changed in that time. But they almost still do. They're looking to indies, and they are looking at what's popular in indies more than they were.
Yes,
but they still have a hand in dictating the trends because they're planning 2 years ahead. They're like, we are going to make dragon romantasy huge in 2020 or because we're going to publish this Rebecca Yarros book that we're planning. So there is an element of them still being able to dictate trends because they're kind of planning so far ahead.
Yeah.
On the flip side, we can see the trends and act on it straight away. We can see that Richard Osman's style of covers is blowing up, and within a couple of weeks,
days, yeah,
we can have recovered our books to do the same thing. So I think that they're kind of picking up on the speed at which we do things, and it's hard for them to replicate that because they're big organizations. They've got teams of people doing what one or two people do when you're in indie.
Yes. Okay, so that's traditional. Let's talk about the public perception and how that's evolving of self-publishing. The first thing I want to say about that is I think for a large percentage of the public, they don't know what is self-published.
I think
what's traditionally published.
A lot of them don't know or don't care. They probably would notice it if it was a really terrible cover, and if it was really badly edited, they'd probably go, this was probably self-published. But I don't know anyone who'd actually go down on the Amazon listing after having looked at the cover and read the reviews and read the blurb, and then check whether it was Penguin or an independent author who published something.
And you can't tell because we all have our company names, and there's not just the big 4 or 5 trad industry publishers. They've all got imprints. There's probably 50 or 60 what we might call traditional publishing companies in the UK. And so if you see Orange Banana Books Limited, you've no clue whether that's somebody working at their kitchen table or in an office at Hachette or something. So that's the first thing to say. I mean, there was that period where self-publishing equated to vanity publishing. They were the first people who came up when the system were opened up with the Kindle, etc., and uploading. The vanity publishing people, the money grabbers, were there straight away, exploiting people who wanted to be published authors, giving them their once-in-a-lifetime publishing contract in exchange for £5,000 or something, and they would do a base amount of work with it. So there was that, and people did that, and they had their hardback book, and they showed people there to go down to their family, so they've been published, and that's what they'd done. And so that got us a bad rep to start off with. We kind of emerged from that and spent the first few years saying, no, it's not vanity publishing, it's an option. And then I think there was this moment where a lot of authors switched from wanting to be traditional published but putting up with self-publishing for now to it being their choice. Self-publishing being the choice of control and earnings, and hopefully that's kind of where we are now, although it's interesting that can now lead to that traditional contract. And in some particular genres, so in particularly your kind of area, Cara, I think self-publishing itself has now become quite credible in the way that indie music was credible in the 90s.
Yeah, and I think because it's allowing people, especially in spicy romance, there are some of the dark romance books, for example, some of the mafia stuff, the things that are quite specific kinks and things that people want to read about, that would never be traditionally published, even in the post 50 Shades of Grey era, where publishers are getting a little bit more open to it. A lot of the more niche stuff, like there's absolutely no way that would be traditionally published. So readers, I think in my kind of genre, are a lot more aware of it and a lot more wanting to support it. And they, possibly because they're a slightly younger demographic as well, they understand more about how we operate and how our businesses run, and they're very supportive. And I think probably your readership, for example, would not have as much of an idea or care as much. I think mine would probably actively support self-published authors because they're more aware of what the situation is, whereas I don't think your readership would necessarily know.
No, okay. There's an increasing focus on the books themselves, and I think for most readers that's always been the case. Of not really knowing whether the books, but there is an onus on us as far as possible to make sure that our books are indistinguishable from traditionally published books. I mean, I have to do that, but it just takes away that one moment where people are going to question the background of your book.
Yeah, and I think that's, for those of us who do this as a profession, we're doing it because or even just because you actually want to put out a really quality product. That's what we've always strived for, is to edit to the best of your capability, to put the best cover on it that you can. That's why we study the Amazon bestseller charts to see what the cover trends are. That's why we have K-Lytics reports. When I meet people, and actually even my friends who are still in traditional publishing, because in trad publishing, you'll work in marketing, and you probably won't have a clue what the editorial, you might have some idea, but what the editorial department does, what the production department does, you don't know all the ins and outs. And when I actually talk about what we do in terms of running a business, it kind of blows people's minds. They're like, I had no idea there was actually so much involved in self-publishing. So I think most of the time when I talk to people now, I say I run a publishing company, because I do run a publishing company. And kind of try to explain it a bit, because mostly if you say you're self-published, the question I get, and I always kind of laugh and then I don't really know how to answer, is, so is there any money in that then? And I'm kind of like, how do I answer this? Because and I'm like, well, let me put it this way. I'm friends with some authors whose income would make your eyes water, but you've probably never heard of them.
Yes.
Because the beautiful thing about self-publishing, actually, I think, is that you can be incredibly successful and your income can be like blowing trad published authors out the water, and people will still never have heard of you because there's so many of us. Because
and I think for me, it's the mid-list authors as well. It's probably I think I've probably mentioned this before. I always remember these. Once a year, there's always a Guardian article or a Times article about a Booker Prize winner who's gone back to their job as a solicitor because, everyone read their book. Everyone in inverted commas read their book, and they were in the papers all the time, and it was marvellous. But actually, they only made £110,000 over 5 years from it or something. And yet, a mid-list author, we've got friends knocking on $500,000 a year who you've absolutely never heard of, and they're just, they're just getting the money because that 70% of the ebook price is so much dramatically better than anything you're going to get in a trad contract.
Yeah, I mean, it never occurred to me to do anything else. I was working in trad publishing at the time when I started listening to the Self-Publishing Show and Joe Penn's podcast, and it just never occurred to me. I was like, oh, of course I can do this myself. Like, I know exactly what to do. Why would I give up that control and that level of income? And why would I waste? I'm a really impatient person. So the idea of wasting 2 years of having my book shut in a drawer, chasing.
You knew too much. You knew too much about the industry. Well, so that's the last part of this discussion, which is going to be our own perception of self-publishing. And I think that's a key point there, because I think it has gone, in the time I've been involved in self-publishing, from a kind of couldn't get published route.
Yes. Because
I've chosen independence. I've chosen independent publishing because it's the route I want to do. And that's such a key thing that seems to exist now.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, if I was doing it again, I would do the exact same thing. I think personally, I'm at a point where I'm probably looking at more hybrid deals and hoping that becomes more of a thing, purely because it is flipping hard work. It's really hard. I think in just going back to the Bill Bryson article to end things with, he said he doesn't really write anymore, and he kind of misses the writing, but he doesn't miss all the other stuff that comes with it, all the admin and the checking emails and blah, blah. And you think, if you're doing that as a trad published author, you might as well be an indie and do all that stuff and then keep more of your money.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it has absolutely. There's still people who don't understand and are still coming brand new, fresh into the industry every day. But I think now when people find out what's possible as an indie author, maybe because there's just so many more examples of people doing it now, they look at it with excitement rather than a resigned sort of like, well, I guess if I want to get my book out there, I have to self-publish.
Yeah.
That's the difference that I see.
Another thing I think I like about a change in our own sort of way that we talk about the industry has been, and this is something that is a real stark contrast to traditional publisher. You're a traditionally published author. I get the impression that the feedback you get about your sales and everything is quite opaque. I don't think you get very clear signals, whereas our conversations are not about, I've been published, which is basically the only conversation a traditional published author has. Our conversations are chart position and sales and profit and costs and stuff, and that's fair, right? That's what authors should be involved in, that conversation, and they're kind of kept out of it, I think, deliberately by the traditional industry.
Also, some just don't have a clue. Like, they have an agent and then they just trust this. Like, I had lunch once with 2 trad published authors, and I said, so what do you guys do with your rights? How's that managed? Have you like separated out your ebook, your audio rights, your foreign rights? Neither of them knew. They just went, my agent deals with that.
Right.
I was like, how can you this is your career, this is your income, this is your job. But one of them also worked in a library at the same time, and the other was also, I think, a journalist as well. So not just making money from their novels, but yeah, we have such a supportive community and such open discussions. And people sometimes find that a bit odd, I think, when if they hear us talking and they're like, you guys talking about like your income and things in quite an open way. But it's part of how we keep track of what's going on. And
it should be.
About what deals we've got and who we've spoken to and what did you get from Podium? Like, what deal did you get from them? Who were you speaking to? And it gives us more power.
Yeah, even though most of those contracts probably say do not disclose.
Probably.
This, but that has been, I mean, talk about Podium, those deals that we do. I mean, that's been one of the good things I think has emerged from the back end of this period, of this crossover period, is the hybrid publishers, which you mentioned there. So obviously I've got a stake in, I started Fuse Books now, Vinci Books, and that's for me a great option if you want the best of both worlds. If you want to see your book in Heathrow Airport, we've got Jacqueline New's book in Waterstones in Scotland at the moment. I've just seen someone sent me a picture, I think from JFK, was it, Airport, of Kerry J. Donovan's books Amazing. Out there, which is incredible.
Mine is supposed to be going into Waterstones, which will make my mother very happy.
Which will be fantastic, so
And my books, my Poppy Pennington books, have my grandma's surname. So if they end up in a Waterstones, I'll be very happy. From that point of view.
Once James at Vinci has done that distribution deal for your book and the date's out, we should go into Waterstones and say, because that your particular branch in Cambridge, I'm sure, will stock them.
Yeah.
But that's a choice, right? And Vinci Books is offering a pretty generous choice, like a lot of these hybrid publishers, a 50-50 kind of split.
Yeah, and there's also Bookature. I've spoken to Cara Books in the past. Yeah, Source Books are one that does a lot of print deals. There's other smaller.
And they're traditionally owned. Quite a lot of them are traditionally owned. I think Hatcher bought Bookature and so on. Yeah. But they are only there offering those deals because of independent publishing that has forced the industry into some kind of SOP towards them. But those completely independent ones like Vinci that spring up, I think is a very positive thing because it gives you the choice. Now, you're not going to keep all the money. You're going to split the profit with that publishing company, but it's a much better deal. And it's something you can do with your eyes open, thinking, I don't want to do all that advertising. I don't have the revenue to put up. So
I've definitely reached the point where I don't want to have, first of all, I don't want all my eggs in one basket, as discussed at the beginning of the episode with the Amazon stuff. I, very much want to have different streams of income. And also, I've got quite a few pen names now. I've got quite a lot of books. Like, if I'm going to make the most of those assets, I kind of need to start looking at these other deals because I do want to be able to focus mainly on writing. Like, I started in 2016, so nearly 10 years now. I've worked really hard. I've done the bit where I'm doing all the stuff myself. And now I would quite like to find hybrid deals that are going to allow me to focus more on the writing and let other people focus on the other stuff and explore wider avenues, because the print distribution is the one thing I think that the trad industry still has the upper hand in.
Yes, so definitely.
Purely because of the volume of the print runs that you need to do. I guess to summarize, my advice for anyone coming into it is self-publish, do a really flipping good job, and then decide if you want to pursue a hybrid deal, and then the power is in your hand and you've got more negotiation.
And use the self-publishing bit to learn your trade. And that was another ridiculous part of the whole traditional system where you'd write this book. I've got this novel in me. I've written this novel. I've written the first 5 chapters. I sent them off. Unfortunately, I've been rejected by 25 people. So that's the end of that. Well, of course it's the end of that, because your first 25 chapters of anybody's writing shit. And so, maybe brilliant agents can see through that. But write the book, rewrite it, write it again, publish it, write the second one based on what you've just learned there. By the third book, that's when you're getting into your stride, you found your voice, you can write properly. It's a craft like learning carpentry or anything else. And then you're in a much better position to send a book off to traditional publishing if you want to do that.
If you've been rejected, for heaven's sake, don't take that as a sign that you shouldn't write.
No.
Sending your manuscript to 25 publishers and being rejected 25 times might feel like, oh my God, they've all rejected me. Essentially, that's 25 people. That's 25 editorial assistants who are newly employed, probably straight out of an MA in publishing, on not very much money a year, who have been given the responsibility of looking through those email submissions and weeding out the ones that they think are okay. Would you quit if you got 25 readers say they didn't particularly like your book? Of course you wouldn't, because you'd likely have a huge number more people who actually enjoyed it. So don't be put off if you've queried and been rejected. That is not a sign of whether or not you should do this.
Absolutely not. Okay, right, that is it for this week. We need to wrap things up because you and I have another episode to record in 5 minutes, because we're going to be in Ireland next week. I shouldn't do an accent. And we're going to be in Ireland next week, in Cara, the Republic of Ireland, the ROI, and we are going to be there on St. Patrick's Day, which is going to be a bit messy, and we are going to be in the wild Atlantic way, and I can't wait because it's such a beautiful country.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the sort of country where it could be horizontal rain and wind, but that kind of doesn't matter because that's how I imagine that part of the world is anyway. So we'll see. It's exposed to the Atlantic. We can almost wave to our American friends from there.
Yeah, my 7-year-old son has asked me to bring back a leprechaun.
Okay.
And all my single friends have asked me to bring back a tall, bearded Irishman. So that's what we're on the lookout for.
So it probably sounds like an illegal people smuggling operation going on here, but okay. All right, well, I'll look out for that for you.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, if you're going to be in Ireland, come and say hello. I'd love to have a chat to you and have a drink. And
we're doing a session, aren't we? A podcast sort of related.
We are going to do a session. Yeah, we're going to talk about some of the things we've been talking about on the podcast. I'm probably going to present on your book package at some point during the week. Yeah, and we're back next week. We are going to be talking about a new tool, an AI analysis tool that we've both been quite excited about, and we've both put our books through it, and we're going to talk about how AI can do an analysis and improve our writing.
Yeah.
That's next week.
That is next week. Don't expect a costume change.
No. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Sign up for episode alerts at indiewritersclub.com. Come and chat with us at our exclusive Discord server at indiewritersclub.com/Discord. Or join our Facebook group at indiewritersclub.com/Facebook. And you can support the podcast at indiewritersclub.com/support. And don't forget to share your weekly word counts, because no matter what you've achieved this week, we're here to cheer you on. Thank you for being part of the Indie Writers Club.
The Indie Writers Club was brought to you by Publish Drive. With one click, self-publish your ebooks, audiobooks and print books to thousands of stores and libraries worldwide. And now you can start for free forever. Publish Drive's new free plan lets you publish your first ebook absolutely free. No subscription fees, no commissions, keep 100% of the royalties. Get your titles online in just a few minutes at publishdrive.com.